If you follow amusement parks and roller coasters, there's a good chance you've heard about how over in Japan, some of the rides tend to get a little strange. While the amusement industry tends to be the same throughout the world, a lot of these parks put their own spin on some of these attractions. So in this video, we'll be looking at the 10 weirdest rides I got to experience in Japan. Whether that be because of layout, theme, the actual type of attraction, or just anything else that makes the ride a little bizarre. Now, what is weird to some people won't be weird to others, and while not every attraction on here is a great ride, they're all here for a reason. I'm going to be sure to explain to you exactly what each of these rides did to make it on my top 10 weirdest Japan roller coasters list. And I want to start things off with SPINTURN, a spinning family coaster like I've never seen before. It's manufactured by MOZA. They have a lot of different coasters in this park. In this particular ride, seats 2 guests in a vehicle, and the cars freely rotate, which means it is almost exclusively based on weight. And unlike some other spinning coasters, because these vehicles are so small, you as a passenger can easily rotate it just by shifting your body weight. I rode by myself for this one, which put the vehicle extremely off balance, and as we were going up the lift hill, I was swinging my body from left to right, which caused the vehicle to drastically change direction every few seconds, and then continue to do that on the ride course, which caused some of the craziest spinning I've ever seen. So while the layout of this coaster isn't anything interesting, the vehicles are the reason why I've put this ride on this list. Coming in at number 9 is a ride that many of you have probably ridden. You might know it as Batman the Ride at many Six Flags parks. There is a clone of this in Japan, except it is called DIAVLO and is located at HIMEJI Central Park, and there is nothing interesting about the ride. However, how the park runs the ride is the reason why it has made this list. This ride runs with water cannons, aka when the train passes by a certain section, it triggers a sensor that shoots off a blast of water at the train, essentially turning this into a water ride. I've never seen anything like it before, but they had multiple blasts throughout the ride course, so especially if you're sitting in the front row, you're going to get soaked. At the number 8 spot, we have a pretty standard TOGO layout that runs 2 different trains via a switch track. This ride is located at YOMIURILAND, and how they cycle this is completely dependent of how you want to ride, because there are 2 sides of this station, one for a stand-up train and one for a sit-down train. And whenever the train is ready to go, they simply slide the track into place away from the ride platform, and that's how you experience it. It's an odd concept, but it certainly works well. Not to mention it's cool starting and ending your ride with a switch track. And I think the next coaster on this list originally had that idea, but they don't have it implemented, because the number 7 spot is Pink Typhoon Standing Coaster, and the name is not the only strange thing about this ride. If you ever got the chance to ride Shockwave back when it was at King's Dominion, this layout is almost identical. However, that was a TOGO stand-up coaster, and even though standing is in the name, this ride was not operating as a stand-up coaster, but rather had a backwards train. They didn't even have a forwards option. It was very strange. Going through was essentially Shockwave's layout, but sitting down backwards. So now we're at number 6, and if you find yourself in Japan, there's a good chance that you'll come across a jet coaster, and one of the ones I rode is taking this spot because it is themed to dinosaurs. Specifically, part of the ride structure looks like a freaking stegosaurus. Gao is located at Greenland, and it takes up a massive amount of space, but it does literally nothing. It's a bunch of straight sections. It kind of feels like a family coaster, even though it's over 100 feet tall. The lift hill is actually steeper than the drop, so the whole thing just leaves you getting off going, what the heck was that? But the ride structure is impressive enough, and with that giant dinosaur, it for sure deserves a spot on this list. So now we're at the number 5 spot, and now is when we start to really get to the strange rides. Number 5 is Space Fantasy the Ride at Universal Studios Japan. And unfortunately, because this is an indoor coaster, I don't have very much footage to actually show you, but I encourage you at some point to go look up a POV, though I don't know how much you'll actually be able to see because a lot of this attraction takes place in the dark. But I didn't even know this ride exists before I walked up to it, so I hadn't seen a POV, and I think that's largely what made this ride so weird for me. It's a spinning coaster that essentially takes you throughout space, and then at the end has this big giant explosion while you're among the stars and all these planets are around you. And it was a long ride too. If I remember correctly, it had like 3 lift hills. So in that regard, the weirdest part about about it was the theme, but it was also very well done, so I thoroughly enjoyed it. At the number 4 spot is a Japan signature. It is the TOGO Ultra Twister. This is a pipeline coaster. There are 4 of them in Japan and you can't get them anywhere else. I saw 3 of them on my trip, but only rode 2 of them because one of them was closed. And the coaster features 2 switch tracks, a vertical lift hill, a vertical drop, multiple heartline inversions, and a backward section. Not to mention that you are on the same level as the track, so it's very strange, but it's a very good ride. Be sure to ride one of these if you happen to be in Japan. So now we're at the number 3 spot, and from here on out, each one of the coasters that I'm going to show you is an indoor coaster, so the footage will be a little limited, but because they're indoors, the park is able to do things that you just couldn't achieve if the ride was outside. So at the number 3 spot, we have GEKION Live at Tokyo JOYPOLIS. This is a drive tire launched spinning coaster with an inversion. Those 3 things you don't normally find all together in one ride, but it's here on this coaster. And to top it all off, how could it get any stranger? This is an interactive coaster. It's essentially a video game. The entire first half of the ride is like Guitar Hero, where there's a button on your restraint that lines up with a graphic that you're essentially playing for a high score, and then as soon as someone wins at the end of the game, that's when you launch off into the ride. It is so strange. I don't know if I liked it, but it was certainly something unique. At the number 2 spot, we have Spin Runway at YOMIURILAND. This ride is essentially themed to a fashion factory, and like GEKION Live, it has an element of interactivity, because while you're going up the spiral lift hill, they have screens surrounding you with a little character that bounces up and down, and it's like Flappy Bird, where you hit a button on your restraint to get it to dodge obstacles and collect points. And once you get to the top, they start blasting Taylor Swift music, and you essentially glide around a cityscape through different articles of clothing and fashion related things. It is so strange. I never thought I would ever ride a clothing themed roller coaster, but it exists here at YOMIURILAND. So what is the number 1 coaster? It is what I believe to be the strangest ride I have ever ridden, and that is Panic Coaster Back DAAAN at Tokyo Dome City. This is a fairly new Gerstlauer launch coaster, and I didn't know a single thing about it before riding, and I think that's what made it so great. I'm going to do my best to explain it, but it's probably best if you just watch a POV after this video so you understand it. But the way it works is essentially you board your vehicle, launch straight out of the station, go through a layout completely in the dark, and then come back to the station, except not through a complete ride course. See, there's actually a switch track, so now you're back in the station, but you're facing the opposite direction as where you started off. There was a blank wall on all sides of you, and now suddenly they use projection mapping, put in loud music and fireworks, launch you backwards, and you go through the whole thing again, except now the room is brightly colored with these glowing orbs that are changing colors, turning on and off. It's blasting music, and now suddenly it's a giant party. The whole thing is a giant acid trip. It's really funny. I had the biggest smile on my face going through that backward section because I could not believe what we just experienced. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. I have no idea what the theme of this ride is, but it was so much fun. It was very strange, which is why I've put it at the number 1 spot on this list. So there you have it. Those are what are, in my opinion, the 10 strangest rides I rode in Japan. There's definitely some other ones that were close contenders, and granted, I didn't ride every coaster in Japan, so I'm sure there's some I missed, but as from the parks I visited, there were definitely some odd attractions. If you find yourself in Japan, be sure to give some of these a try, because you won't find attractions like this in other parts around the world. And that's what makes Japan such a cool destination for roller coasters. You don't just get great rides, you get some weird ones too, and that's when it starts to get fun. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to stay tuned for more here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.